What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Erdell, and in today's video, I'm going to be briefly introducing 4 dangerous gambits for you E4 players, which few people know about, but that really pack a punch and can easily give y'all some quick and easy wins. Now, the first one is actually against the Owens defense. Here, Black trying to fianchetto their light squared bishop and put pressure on our central pawn on e4. And as many of you know, this pawn move of b6 and bishop b7, Black is playing a very solid defensive system, and it's very hard to go against, especially in the main lines. In fact, I myself have been going with d3, knight d2, and then transposing into a King's Indian attack type setup for quite a while against the Owens defense. But my guy Andre showed me that there is another option here, and that's actually just continuing with the normal move of d4, but now against bishop b7, playing the almost inaccurate looking move of bishop g5 with the Naselwaus Gambit. What on earth is going on? I mean, when I first saw this position from Andre's comment, I was going, gosh, I mean, this bishop can simply just win the pawn on e4. And second off, this bishop on g5, what on earth is it doing? Well, we're going to cover what happens if Black captures on e4 and then novel idea that White has against it. But this bishop on g5 is surprisingly making things pretty hard on Black, and that's in terms of development. In the Owens defense, Black loves to play this move of e6 followed by d5 and or c5, but obviously with this bishop here, e6 simply is not possible. What happens if we see a move here like bishop takes pawn? Well, we're now going to continue with d5. Whole idea being we lured this bishop out to the center of the board, we push our pawn to d5, and we're not allowing this bishop to go back to its home on b7, and because of that, Black's going to have some very weak light squares for the rest of this game, and on top of that, some issues in trying to develop their pieces. For example, look at this knight on b8. How on earth can this knight get involved in the game? I mean, obviously, if this knight ever comes to c6, thank you for the knight. If it ever comes to a6, yet again, thank you for the knight. And if a move like d6 is played, as we're going to see later on in this video, this is really going to weaken even more the light squares, specifically the squares of c6 and d7. Now, really, by playing d5 again, e6 cannot be played. d6 simply weakens this b5 to e8 diagonal. So what happens here if we see a move like knight f6? Very common response from Black. Well, now let's just continue with knight c3. Notice that we're actually threatening to win a piece by simply capturing off this knight and then winning this bishop on e4, as this knight is the key defender. And if a move like e6 here, we can actually just take the bishop right away, as this knight will be pinned to the queen on d8. So there's really only 2 moves here that give Black not a completely lost position, and those 2 moves being bishop f5 as well as bishop g6. Bishop g6 is more accurate, but even then, we're now going to expand on the king side. We got this bishop over here. Why not go after it and play this move of h4? Notice what we're threatening. I mean, even if Black plays a move like e6, we're still going to push with h5, making up even more space. And here, if Black wants to take on h5, we can actually just capture right back with the rook. Whole idea being, if knight takes h5 is played, thank you for the queen on d8. And here, if a move like bishop f5 is played, trying to hang on to this minor piece, let's continue chasing it down. g4, and as y'all can see, this bishop is simply trapped. A move like knight takes g4 does not work because of the queen on d8, and a move like bishop e4 also does not work, as we can simply capture off that bishop and this knight is pinned. Really, one of the best ways that Black can go with here is playing this move of bishop takes g4, but even then, we're going to snatch off this defending piece of f6. Queen takes f6, runs into queen takes g4, and we're still going to be up in material and development. And here, bishop takes queen, I mean, Black can keep trying to take off as much material as they can, but at the end of the day, they're going to be a pawn down. And here is White, we're not only up a pawn, but we have an advantage in development, space, and activity. Here, White with almost a +3 advantage. So y'all, with the Naselwaus Gambit, once we get this bishop over to the king side and we push with h4, Black's really smart here to play a move like h6, which does 2 things. First off, Black is attacking our bishop on g5, and secondly, giving this bishop on g6 some room to breathe. If we do see this option, we can simply capture out that knight on f6, and sure, it doesn't trap the bishop, but we can take more space, so why not do it? We can now continue with a move like bishop d3. Whole idea being, if Black wants to snatch off our bishop, okay, we'll take back with tempo. And here, if a move like bishop e7, okay, we'll castle queenside, castle kingside from Black. We can start developing our pieces. And really what we're trying to do here, guys, is get our knight on g1 to d4. You can either start with knight ge2 or start off with knight f3. Either is completely okay. At some point, black's probably going to have to play a move like d6 if they want to even hope about getting these two pieces in the corner of the board involved at all. And against this, okay, let's play a move like g4, try to get even more of a grip on this key light square of f5. And the very next move, continue with knight d4. Notice how active and strong this knight on d4 is. Very hard position for black to work with here. And our next underrated chess opening gambit introduction is against the move e6 with the French defense, in which case we're going to play b3 followed by a very immediate bishop b2 with the Reti Gambit. Whole idea being if black wants to play something like knight f6 and decline the gambit, we're completely okay by playing e5 with tempo followed by f4, expanding on the king side of the board. And here if black captures the pawn, we're now going to continue with knight c3. Now obviously here if black doesn't want to just lose this pawn on e4 and face a very strong bishop on b2 pouncing down all the way to that g7 pawn, black's going to have to play a move here like f5 or knight f6. First off, this move of f5. What happens if black takes the pawn and tries to hang on to it at all costs? I actually don't think that this is the best option from black because we can now play f3, simply looking to capture on e4. And if black takes on f3, sure, they are up a pawn, but notice the advantage of development we have as white. And on top of that, this pawn on e6, because of that f5 push, is a big target. In fact, we're going to go after that weakness right away with bishop c4 followed by queen e2. There was actually a master level game, which continued with black trying to play knight d5, hanging onto that pawn on e6, but white now played knight takes d5, and after c takes, played bishop b5 with check. White went on to win this game. And I mean, talk about an active bishop pair, checking the king. This bishop on b2 pouncing all the way down to g7, an active queen on e2, and this knight on f3 ready to get involved at a moment's notice. We have castling queenside one move away. Getting this rook on the open e file, f file as well, would be very strong, and we're in business. So y'all, this move of f5 after the accepted ready, in which case black takes on e4, does save the pawn temporarily, but it really makes this pawn on e6 a big weakness, and black is losing a ton of time by doing this in terms of their opening development. What about this move of knight f6, developing a minor piece and then trying to defend this pawn on e4 as well? Well, now we're going to continue with queen e2. Whole idea being castling queenside is only one move away, and we'd love to play a move like knight takes e4, literally evening out the material and having this very strong dark squared bishop aimed directly at the king side of the board, which is likely where this king is going to be chilling later on. How can black defend the pawn on e4 if they don't want to allow this? Well, there's a couple of different ways. One of them is with this move of queen d4, and against this, surprisingly, there's no way to get any kind of discovered tactics against this queen. However, what we can do is just play this move of f3, again, trying to take on e4, and sure, after taking on f3, black is up a pawn, but notice now we're getting development with tempo against this queen, and we can now continue with a move like castling queenside. We, as white, have currently 6 pieces developed in this game, with black only having 2 and 3 after this next move. And here's white, we cannot play passive chess. We are up a development, but we're also down a pawn, so we got to have some urgency in throwing our pieces towards the opponent's king and really bring in the pressure. And that is with this move of g4. I love this idea, trying to play g5, kicking this knight around. And if this knight wants to capture on g4, okay, black is ahead 2 pawns, but we can now push with d4, d5 options in the air. Rook g1 would be a very nice file. And here if black plays a move like bishop d7, we can actually play bishop h3, not pawn h3, but bishop h3, gaining even more development while attacking this knight. And here if we see something like knight f6, again, keep the pressure on black, play this move of d5, trying to kick this knight around. And here if we see a move like knight e7, we can actually play knight e5, whole idea being if black wants to castle queenside, we can capture on f7. Here white with great attacking chances and a really fun game against the French defense. So we just covered 2 underrated gambits for the e4 player, one against b6 with the Owens defense and the other with the French. What about this move of c5? Our next 2 gambits are actually against the Sicilian defense, one of them starting with a3, the delayed wing gambit, trying to play b4. Now, obviously, with all these openings, I have made a specific video for each of them, so we're not going super in-depth, but I really want to show you how dangerous this move a3 can be. My personal favorite move to play against is knight c6. And the reason for this is that, yes, this does seem like a very logical move, and in fact, it fights for the center and the square of b4. But if we push to b4 and black decides to accept the delayed wing gambit, we can now play c3 with tempo on that knight and then expand with d4. And guys, I've played this opening for years. Most of the time, 80-90% plus of the time, black's going to play the move d5 because they simply don't want to get kicked around with options like d5 followed by f4. And if we do see this move of d5, we can capture that pawn and then play the move here that I learned from the Ginger GM Simon Williams, knight a3. Absolutely brutal move. It honestly looks kind of strange at first sight, but this knight b5 idea is extremely strong, eyeing that c7 square, which would currently do a powerhouse fork on the king, rook, and queen on d5. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a move here like knight f6, and in that case, we're still going to continue with knight b5, obviously threatening knight c7 with check, winning that queen. And here, if we see a move like queen d8 dropping back, we can now push with d5. I've reached this position a ton. Whole idea being if knight takes d5, yes, we're down 2 pawns, but we're simply about to win a piece. With queen takes d5, now we're the ones up material, and obviously queen takes d5 runs into that powerhouse fork that I just talked about. Knight c7 check, snatching off this queen. We're simply at material. Here white with a big edge. See how knight takes d5 obviously runs into queen takes d5. What about this move of knight e5? Well, in this case, let's keep the pressure on black and play bishop f4. If this knight wants to move, we have knight c7 with check, completely winning. And here, if a move like knight fd7 trying to hang on to the knight, let's continue to add the pressure. Knight f3. If we see something here like f6, we can now play knight fd4, actually eyeing the square of e6. And here, if black tries to play something like knight c5, preventing this, which is actually the best move in the position, it's still completely lost for black because we have bishop takes e5, and if black captures this bishop back, we have queen h5, capturing on e5. We're threatening the rook on h8. We're threatening knight c7 with check, winning the rook on a8. And black might want to just throw in the towel here. So that's one way that black can play with knight f6. I've seen this move a ton. Against this, just continue with knight b5 ideas, followed by d5, kicking this knight around. What about a move here like e5 from black, expanding in the center? This is also a move I see quite a bit. We got knight b5 attacking that c7 square. Whole idea being if queen d8, we're still going to continue with d5. And yet again, if knight ce7, we got d6. I've reached this position yet again a ton in my own games. And obviously, I mean, this is just completely winning for black. There's no way for black here to save the knight and to save this knight c7 check threat idea. So the delayed wing gambit with a3 and b4 really does offer white some hyper-dynamic chances and a ton of variations. Obviously, we just did a very short introduction to knight c6 and the things that black can try to do against it. There's a ton of other moves that I've covered on this channel, including d5, e6, g6, etc. And all of those lines, though, white does have some very unique and nice ideas that you can work with. Now, what about our last gambit for today's video? It's actually called the Beaver Gambit, popularized by none other than Jonathan Schrontz. Here, white starting off with knight f3, and now with e6, we're going into the Alapin variation of c3, trying to prepare this d4 push. Well, that's what black thinks anyways. Against this move, knight f6, we're now going to play e5, and now against knight d5, centralizing that minor piece, we're actually not going to go with the regular move of d4, but we're going to play this oddball move of b4 with the Beaver Gambit, putting pressure on the c5 pawn. And really, if c takes b4 is played, we can now continue with c4, kicking this knight around. And now black has a big decision to make, and that's where to put this knight. There's a lot of different places that can go. First off, if a move like knight f4, we're just going to continue with d4, followed by h4, kicking this knight around all over the board, and we're going to get a ton of development. What about this move of knight b6? Well, in this case, black actually has a very hard position to deal with because we expand with d4, and at first sight, it seems as if this knight is simply putting pressure on c4. Black's up a pawn. This pawn on b4 isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But how does black proceed here? How does black develop their pieces? We as white are going to continue with ideas like bishop d3, putting a ton of firepower towards the king side of the board. And if black here goes with a move like d6, we'll just snatch off that pawn. If a move like d5, we're going to snatch it off on d6 anyways with the rule en passant. Whole idea being, if you take back with the queen or the bishop, we got c5, and here we're simply winning a minor piece. The Beaver Gambit getting us a 1 game by move 9 against the Sicilian. So knight f4 simply runs into d4, followed by h4, and knight b6 runs into d4 as well, in which case d6 and d5 are nearly impossible for black to get in without losing material. What about this move of knight e7? Well, in this case, there's not a ton of chess opening traps, but we still get a very fun and solid game following d4 expanding the center of the board. If black wants to play something like d5, okay, we'll use the rule of en passant, lure this queen out, and now we can actually go with a3, almost a delayed wing gambit type move. The opening I just showed you guys, putting some pressure on b4. We'd love to capture on b4. Obviously, if queen takes b4 is played, we can get some more development with a move like bishop d2. And here, if black decides to capture on a3, we can now play knight takes a3, knight b5 in the air. And also notice if a move like a6, we can play knight b5 anyways, right? I mean, if black wants to take her knight, thank you for the rook. And here white, yet again, with a one game. See how we just covered briefly a few different places that this knight can go, but knight c7 gives us some very interesting and exciting theoretical chess in the opening. That starts off yet again with d4. Notice, no matter where this knight goes, we're going to continue with this move of d4. Let's say black now continues with an option such as d6, just trying to undermine our center a little bit here and put some pressure on e5. Well, in this case, we're now going to continue with bishop d3, and against d takes e5, we have two options. One of them is playing knight takes e5, and the other bishop g5. Both of these have a ton of chess opening traps, and I'll briefly introduce you to a couple of them each. Let's first start off with this move, knight takes e5. First off, this appears to be simply losing because of queen takes d4. Right now, black ahead 2 points of material, attacking both our knight and the rook on a1. But now we're playing the shocking move, knight takes f7. Wow, what a tactic here. Whole idea being that we're attacking this rook on h8. If black wants to play a move like king takes f7, we now have bishop g6 with check, and we pick off this queen on d4. See how king takes f7 simply loses black the queen. What about this move of queen captures on a1? Well, in this case, we're going to take off this rook, and we now have a ton of firepower aimed directly towards the king side of the board. We're only down 1 point of material. We also have queen h5 check ideas on the way, and if g6 is ever played, we can simply snatch off that pawn, play bishop takes g6 with check, and this king is going to be in big, big trouble. That being said, guys, going back to this position, obviously king takes f7 and queen captures rook are both losing for black. The one move here that gives black the edge is g6, and I covered this in my other video. Even then, it's going to be very hard for black to navigate this, and g6, in my honest opinion, is just a computer-like move. I don't think I myself would find g6 if I were playing black in this position. See, all coming out of the beaver, in which case d6 and d takes e5 is played, we can capture on e5 and try to provoke this queen takes d4 move, which is actually nothing wrong with queen takes d4 technically, but they got to be ready to play g6, trying to defend the rook while also attacking ours. Even then, after that point, black has to be very careful. Another option you can play here as white is bishop g5, attacking this queen, in which case, again, black's best move here is f6. But this now runs into knight takes e5, and yet again, black has to be very careful. This move of g6 is the saving grace of black's position. Anything else, we're simply going to have ourselves a one game from a practical standpoint. Notice here, if a move like pawn takes on e5, thank you for the queen. And if a move like f takes g5, we now see that we have a threat of queen h5 with check, now forcing king e7, getting this king all the way out to d6. And now the very quiet looking move of knight d2. And notice here, I could be wrong. Let me know in the comment section if I'm missing something, but I think if we were playing this in an online game, we could actually just pre-move knight e4, and no matter where black goes here, the very next move, we're going to win this game. Thanks for watching today's video. If you'd like a closer look at the opening theory behind the Beaver Gambit, click that video to the left. If you'd like to learn more about the delayed wing gambit against the Sicilian defense, click that video to the right. Leave a comment down below to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.